All right, we are honored and pleased to have Tlacaelel Fuentes with us, who drove all the way up from Albuquerque today to talk about Dia de los Muertos. Thank you, Bill, for inviting him. He has established himself as an artist in the visual and performing arts, both regionally and nationally. His name means he who invigorates the heart. What a beautiful name to have. His multidisciplinary career spans performance, visual art, and curation. All embody a rare kind of intensity, as you can see. He's not messing around. Born in the Southwest, trained under celebrated modernists such as poet Owen Dodson and choreographer Paul Sanasardo, and he has performed with El Teatro Campesino here in New Mexico and California, and with El Teatro Campesino in New York's MoMA. Along the way, he's collected not only accolades, but a fierce sense of creative independence. Welcome. We're so glad to have you with us today.
I didn't know I was all that, so thanks for telling me. It's so wonderful to see such beautiful souls gathered here in worship and praise and showing love for the community and generosity for all you want to bring to those maybe who are less fortunate. So it's an honor to be invited here. Thank you, Bill, for making the connection. Today is Dia de los Muertos, and that's why I'm wearing my native beads. But in the Catholic faith, some of you may know, it's also All Souls Day. And so I wanted to, as a Chicano, kind of reflect how the two cultures, the Aztec culture and the Christian culture, came together. And so that's why I'm wearing the beads and, of course, the rosary. Oftentimes you see, I'm sure around Taos, people have these things hanging from their windshields, and they don't have a clue what they're supposed to do with it. But it looks cool, so I'll hang it. But I am very prayerful along with you. And so again, thank you. What an honor to be here. I have some candles that I wanted to light, but I understood that some people would be sensitive to the smoke. So I would like you all to take one at some point, and also your cempasúchil, your marigold, and go home and make your own little altar. By the way, these don't have scent, but I want to give you this gift as my appreciation for being able to be here with you today. So please, if there's more than one in a family, if you could just take one, because I want to make sure there's enough for everybody. So may the light, may the fire always burn within us. And so my gift to you, what I would like to do real quick is I would like to just fan the air as we have the spirits among us. We call them back to us. And so the feather is so important to all of us. Not just Native Americans, but it's the air that we feel sometimes when a bird flies by us. So may blessings be upon all of you. Dia de los Muertos is not typically celebrated in Mexico the way we do it here in the United States. It has sort of evolved and metamorphosized. In fact, this whole thing is relatively new. I think it's about 40 years old here in the country. But the marigolds in Mexico are adorned, they adorn the cemeteries, and oftentimes they'll create paths so that the spirits of the dead, the difuntos, will have a carpet of softness to come onto when they're coming back to us. We burn the flame or the fire so that the smoke will give them the direction they need to travel on this bed of marigolds, which is called cempasúchil in Aztec language. So we have an altar that we put together, and it has water on it, which symbolizes water and life. By the way, none of you look like me. You all look really juicy. And I'm just dry bones. But so the flame is and the fire is so that these spirits, as they come back to us today, will have a path to travel on the marigolds, and then the smell to lead them to us. In Mexico, they paint the tombstones, and they sit around and they bring the dead person's most favorite, whatever it is, food, alcohol, activity, and they put that on the altar so that when the spirits arrive, they have whatever it is that their most favorite item was in life. So we welcome them back. We paint the tombstones. Some people will be in the cemetery all night long. They play their guitars, they sing, they dance, and it's just an amazing holiday. But for today, rather than, and by the way, why I chose the title, In Love with the Dead, because I always say to people, as long as I look at you and I see that twinkle in your eyes, your ancestors are still here. And I'm seeing their presence through that twinkle in your eye. So In Love with the Dead is that we love those who have gone before us, our ancestors, those who have loved us and lived with us and sang with us and danced with us and cried for us. They're all in that twinkle of your eye. And so that's why I liked the title In Love with the Dead, because we still love those who have gone on. We don't forget them. I often say that when somebody passes on and we're tearful, we're really kind of crying for ourselves, right? Because we won't have them anymore. They've moved on, right? But not in that twinkle, they're still here. So it's about life. And there's a very famous song that Joan Baez sang called Gracias a la muerte, gracias a la vida. Thank you, death, thank you, life. Because we all are going to be headed to this one day. In fact, El Teatro Campesino, Luis Valdez, his approach to theater was that we start with the skeleton, we start with the bones, and then we build on the flesh. And so there's sort of the duality of life and death. The physicists have taught us that even though this body perishes, it moves on to another realm. The energy that occupies our body does not stop. It continues on. It only transforms into something else. And of course, all of us have our ideas of what that could be. As a Catholic, we go live in our mansion in the sky, right? But the spirit continues on, the energy, the electricity. It only gets transformed. So with that, I would like to acknowledge a song about somebody who has died. And all of us, of course, have trauma in our lives related to our growing up as children, as adults. And this song has to do sort of with the trauma of a child growing up with an alcoholic father. It's a song that I learned by Nicolette Larson. How many of you know Nicolette Larson? Remember Nicolette?
Yes.
Wonderful. I'm so bad we lost her so early. She used to sing a song called Got a Whole Lot of Love. But this is a song that I learned from her, and it goes like this. A house, not a home, was the picture Satan painted for sweet little sister and me. Our daddy would frown while mother was praying. His heart was so hardened that he would not believe. In anger he'd swear, his voice cold and loud. His Sundays were spent out with a gambling crowd. I never seen my daddy inside a house of God, for Satan held his hand down a path of sin each rod. Not long ago, our circle was broken when God called on Mother one night. In a voice sweet and low, I heard my mother praying, asking our daddy to raise her children right. The angels rejoiced in heaven last night. I heard my daddy praying, dear God, make it right. He was smiling and singing with tears in his eyes, while Mother with the angels rejoiced last night. While Mother with the angels rejoiced last night. So all of us want to pray that our beloved ones make it to that safe place, that holy place. There is a book that was written by Stephen Vincent Benet, one of the early American authors. I believe he was American. Does anybody recall the work of Stephen Vincent Benet? He did a piece called, or wrote a piece called Johnny Pie and the Fool Killer. And it's a wonderful little tale, and it's about a 9-year-old boy that was raised by step-parents. He was adopted, and his father owned a grinding mill. And the little boy, Johnny, I think he was 9, had to grind the wheat. And if he messed up, his father would beat him and put him down and call him names. And one day, Johnny just got fed up. But before he decided to do what he was going to do, he always was hearing footsteps in the dark, and wherever he might be, he heard footsteps. And in his mind, he became convinced that that was the fool killer, because his father would always call him, "You damn fool, you messed up the wheat, you're a damn fool." So Johnny Pie would always hear the steps of the fool killer coming to get him. And he decided he was going to run away, because he said, well, there's only one way for me to get away from the fool killer, and that's to run away and get away from that mean dad of mine. So I'd like to read some of this. It's a wonderful little tale. By the way, you can actually access it online. It is now in public domain. And I love this book. I love it. You don't hear much about the fool killer these days, but when Johnny Pie was a boy, there was a good deal of talk about him. Some said he was one kind of person, and some said another. But most people agreed that he came around fairly regular, or it seemed so to Johnny Pie. But then Johnny Pie was an adopted child, which is maybe why he took it so hard. The miller and his wife had offered to raise him after his own folks died, and that was a good deed on their part. But as soon as he lost his baby teeth and started acting the way most boys act, they began to come down hard on him. They were good people according to their lights, but their lights were terribly strict ones. And they believed that the harder you were on a youngster, the better and brighter he got. Well, that may work for some people, but it didn't work for Johnny Pie. He was a sharp enough kid and willing enough, as sharp and willing as most boys in Martinsville, but somehow or other, he never seemed to be able to do the right things or say the right words, at least when he was home. Treat a boy like a fool and he'll act like a fool, I say. But there's some folks need convincing. The miller and his wife thought the way to smarten Johnny was to treat him like a fool. And finally, they got so pretty much that he believed it himself. And that was hard on him. for he had a boy's imagination, and maybe a little more than most. He could stand the beatings, and he did. But what he couldn't stand was the way things went at the mill. I don't suppose the miller intended to do it, but as long as Johnny Pie could remember, whenever he heard the death of somebody he didn't like, he'd say, "Well, the fool killer's coming for so-and-so," and sort of smack his lips. It was, as you might say, a family joke. But the miller was a big man with a big red face, and it made a strong impression on Johnny Pie, till finally he got a picture of the fool killer himself. He was a big man, too, in a checkered shirt, with corduroy trousers, and he went walking the ways of the world with a hickory club that had a lump at the end of it. I don't know how Johnny Pie got that picture so clear, but to him, it was just as plain as the face of any human being in Martinsville. And now and then, just to test it, he'd ask a grown-up person kind of timidly if that was the way the fool killer looked. And of course, they'd generally laugh and tell him, yeah, that's how he looks. Then Johnny would wake up at night in his room over the mill and listen for the fool killer's step on the road and wonder when it was coming. But he was brave enough not to tell anybody about that. Finally, though, things got a little more than he could bear. He'd done some boy's trick or other, let the stones grind the wheat a little too fine, maybe, when the miller wanted the mill ground coarse. Just carelessness, you know. But he'd gotten 2 whippings for it, one from the miller and one from the miller's wife. Well, Johnny Pie, the fool killer ought to be along for you most any day now, for I never did see a boy that was such a fool. Johnny looked to the miller's wife to see if she believed it too, but she just shook her head and looked serious. So he went to bed that night, but he couldn't sleep, for every time a bow rustled or the mill wheel creaked, it seemed to him that it must be the fool killer. And early the next morning, before anybody was up, he packed up such duds as he had in a bandana handkerchief and ran away. He didn't really expect to get away from the fool killer very long. As far as he knew, the fool killer got you wherever you went. But he thought he'd give him a big run for his money. Well, at least he thought he would. And when he got on the road, it was a bright spring morning, and the first peace and quiet he'd had in some time. So his spirits rose, and he chunked a stone at the bullfrog as he went along, just to show he was Johnny Pie and still doing business. He hadn't gone more than 3 or 4 miles out of Martinsville when he heard a buggy coming up behind him. He knew the fool killer didn't need a buggy to catch him, so he wasn't afraid of it. But he stepped to the side of the road and let it pass. But it stopped instead. And the black-whiskered man with the stovepipe hat looked out for it. "Hello, bub," he said. "This is the road for the East Liberty, right?" "My name's Johnny Pie, and I'm 11 years old," said Johnny Pie, polite but firm. "And you take the next left at the fork at East Liberty. They say it's a pretty town. I've never been there myself." And he sighed a little. But he thought he'd like to see the world before the fool killer caught up with him. Said the man. "Stranger here too, eh? And what brings a smart boy like you on the road so early in the morning?" "Oh," said Johnny Pie quite honestly, "I'm running away from the fool killer. For the miller says I'm a fool, and his wife says I'm a fool, and almost everybody in Martinsville says I'm a fool, except little Susie Marsh. And the miller says the fool killer's after me, so I thought I'd run away before he came." The black-whiskered man sat in his buggy and wheezed for a while. When he got his breath back, "Well, jump in, bub. You may as well come along with me. The miller may say you're a fool, but I'll say you're a right smart boy. And to be running away from the fool killer all by yourself? And I don't hold with small-town prejudices, and I need a right smart boy, so I'll give you a lift down the road." "But will I be safe from the foal killer if I'm with you?" said Johnny Pie. "For otherwise it don't signify." "Safe!" said the black-whiskered man, and wheezed again. "Oh, you'll be safe as houses. You see, I'm the herb doctor, and some folks think a little in the fool killer's line of business myself. And I'll teach you a trade worth 2 million. So jump in, bub." "Sounds all right the way you say it," said Johnny. "But my name's Johnny Pie." And he jumped into the buggy and went rattling along toward East Liberty with the herb doctor talking and cutting jokes till Johnny thought he'd never met a pleasanter man. About a half a mile from Liberty, the doctor stopped at a spring. "What are we stopping for?" said Johnny Pie. "Wait and see," said the doctor, and he gave him a wink. Then he got a haircloth trunk full of empty bottles out of the back of the buggy and made Johnny Pie fill them up with spring water and label them. Then he added a pinch of pink powder to each bottle and shook them up and corked them and stowed them away. "Well, what is that?" said Johnny, very interested. "Well, that's old Dr. Waldo's unparalleled universal remedy," said the doctor, reading from the label. "Made from the purest snake oil and secret Indian herbs. It cures rheumatism, blind staggers, headache, malaria, 5 kinds of fits, and spots on the eyes. It will also remove all oil or grease stains, clean knives and silver, polished brass, and strongly recommended as a general tonic and blood purifier. Small size, $1. Family bottle, $2.50. "But I don't see any snake oil in it," said Johnny, puzzled, "or any secret Indian herbs." "That's because you're not a fool," said the doctor, with another wink. "Well, the fool killer wouldn't either, but most folks will." And that very same night, Johnny saw, for the doctor made his pitch in East Liberty, and he did it handsome. He took a couple of flaring oil torches, stuck them on the sides of the buggy. He put on a dime and stick pins and did card tricks and told funny stories till he had the crowd Google-eyed. As for Johnny, he let him play the tambourine. Then he started talking about Dr. Waldo's universal remedy, and with Johnny to help him, the bottles went like hotcakes. Well, it was a pile of money. "Well," said Johnny, "I never saw money made easier. You've got to find trade, doctor." "It's cleverness that does it," said the doctor, and slapped him on the back. "Now, a fool's content to stay in one place and do one thing, but the fool killer never caught up with the good pitchman yet." "Well, it's certainly lucky I met up with you," said Johnny, "and if it's cleverness that does it, I'll learn the trade or bust." So he stayed with the doctor quite a while, in fact, till he could make up the remedy and do the card tricks almost as good as the doctor. And for the doctor, he liked Johnny, for Johnny was a biddable boy. But one night, they came into town where things didn't quite go as they usually did. The crowd gathered as usual, and the doctor did his tricks. But all the time, Johnny could see a sharp-faced little fellow going through the crowd and whispering to one man or another, till at last, right in the middle of the doctor's spiel, a sharp-faced fellow gave a shout. "That's him, all right! I'd know them whiskers anywhere!" And with that, the crowd growled once and began to tear slats out of the nearest fence. Well, next thing Johnny knew, he and the doctor were being ridden out of town on the rail, with the doctor's long coattails flying at every jounce. They didn't hurt Johnny particular, but him only being a boy, but they warned him both never to show their faces in this town again, and they heaved the doctor into a thistle patch and went on their ways. "Ow! Ah, said the doctor. "Ooh, ouch." Well, as Johnny was helping him out of the thistle patch, "Go easy with those thistles. And why didn't you give me the office, you blamed little fool?" "Oh, office," said Johnny. "What office?" "When that sharp-nosed man started snooping around," said the doctor, "I thought that infernal Main Street looked familiar. I was there 2 years ago selling solid gold watches for $1 apiece." "But the works to a solid gold watch would be worth more than that," said Johnny. "There weren't any work," said the doctor with a groan, "but there was a nice, very lively beetle inside each case, and it made the prettiest little tick you ever heard." "Well, that certainly was a clever idea," said Johnny. "I never have thought of that." "Clever," said the doctor. Oh, it was ruination. But who'd have thought that fools would bear a grudge for 2 years? And now we've lost the horse and buggy? Well, not to speak of the bottles and the money. Well, there's a lot more tricks to be played, and we'll start again." But though he liked the doctor, Johnny began to feel dubious, for it occurred to him that if all the doctor's cleverness got him was being ridden out of town on a rail, he couldn't be far away from the fool killer, as he thought. And sure enough, as he was going to sleep that night, he seemed to hear the fool killer's footsteps coming after him. Step, step, step. He pulled his jacket up over his ears, but he couldn't shut it out. So when the doctor had got in way and started business over again, he and Johnny parted company. The doctor didn't bear any grudge. He shook hands with Johnny and told him to remember that cleverness was power, and Johnny went on with his running away. He got to a town, and there was a sign in the window that said, "Boy wanted." Well, so he went in. There, sure enough, was the merchant sitting at his desk, and a fine, important man he looked, in his black broadcloth suit. Johnny tried to tell him about the fool killer, but the merchant wasn't interested in that. He just looked Johnny over and saw that he looked like a good, biddable boy and strong for his age. "But remember, no fooling around here, boy," said the merchant sternly, after he'd hired him. "No fooling around," said Johnny, with a light of hope in his eyes. "No," said the merchant meaningly. "We've no room for fools in this business. I can tell you, you work hard and you'll rise. But if you got any foolish notions, just knock them on the head and forget them." Well, Johnny was glad enough to promise that, and he stayed with the merchant 1.5 years. He swept out the store, and he put the shutters up and took them down. He ran errands and wrapped up packages and learned to keep busy 12 hours a day. And being a biddable boy and an honest one, he rose, just like the merchant had said. The merchant raised his wages and let him begin to wait on customers and learn accounts. And then one night, Johnny woke up in the middle of the night, and he seemed to hear what he heard always, far and away, but getting nearer. And the steps of the fool killer coming after him, tramping, tramping. He went to the merchant the next day and said, "Sir, I'm sorry to tell you this, but I have to be moving on." "Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Johnny," said the merchant, "for you've been a good boy. And if it's a question of salary, it isn't that," said Johnny. "But tell me one thing, sir, if you don't mind my asking. Supposing I did stay with you, where would I end?" The merchant smiled. "Well, that's a hard question to answer," he said, "and I'm not much given to compliments. But I started myself as a boy, sweeping out the store, and you're a bright youngster with lots of go-ahead, and I don't see why, if you stuck it out, you shouldn't make the same kind of success that I have." "And what's that?" said Johnny. The merchant began to look irritated. but he kept his smile. Well, he said, I'm not a boastful man, but I'll tell you this. 10 years ago, I was the richest man in town. 5 years ago, I was the richest man in the county. And 5 years from now, well, I aim to be the richest man in the state. His eyes kind of glittered as he said it, but Johnny was looking at his face. It was sallow-skinned and pouchy, with jaw as hard as a rock, and it came upon Johnny that moment that, though he'd known the merchant a year and a half, he'd never really seen him enjoy himself, except when he was driving a bargain. Sorry, sir, he said, but it's like that. If it's like that, I'll certainly have to go. Because you see, I'm running away from the fool killer. And if I stayed here and got to be like you, he'd certainly catch up with me in no... Why, you impertinent little cub, roared the merchant with his face gone red, and all of a sudden, get your money from the cashier. And Johnny was on the road again before he could say Jack Robinson. But this time, he was used to it and walking off whistling. I'll stop here now unless you would like me to keep going. Okay. So Johnny Pie goes on to find other people that he meets along the way. He meets a violinist, and the violinist is struggling with alcoholism. So one morning he wakes up and he sees the violinist frozen in the gutter. And he's like, well, if that's where I'm headed, then I guess I'll move on again, because obviously the fool killer got him. So it's a wonderful little story. I really enjoy... I don't remember where I found this. I think I was living in New York City, and I was working with a very famous African-American poet, may he rest in peace, Owen Dodson. And I was looking at his library of books, and I came across that book, and I started reading it, and I just had to read it from beginning to end. It really doesn't last much longer. But so Johnny Pie, as a young boy, is always running away. And he's meeting all these people that he goes through, and he's realizing, no, that's not going to work for me. That's not going to work for me. So by the time he's an old man, he ends up meeting the little girl that liked him. He got a job in a post office. He did very well. And in the end, Johnny Pie is now an old man. And he runs into the fool killer. And he's tired. And he's fed up. And he says to the fool killer, well, I'm here. You're here. Let's go. Take me. And the fool killer said, Johnny Pie, you're old. I don't want you. So how do we end up in our life's journeys, from birth to death? And so again, it's really important for me to recognize our ancestors. Here is the Spoon River Anthology. Are you folks familiar with that? It's amazing. These are epithets that are put on people's graves. This one is called Lewis Spears. Here lies the body of Lewis Spears, born Lewis Fluke, daughter of Willard Fluke, daughter of Lois Fluke, wife of Sarah Spears, mother of Myrtle and Virgil Spears, children with clear eyes and sound limbs. I was born blind. But I was the happiest of women as a wife, a mother, a housekeeper, caring for my loved ones and making my home a place of order and bounteous hospitality. For I went about rooms and about the garden, and with instinct as sure as sight, as though there were eyes in my fingertips. Glory to God in the highest. I think, are we?
Almost.
Almost, okay.
Yeah, got about 3 minutes.
Can you tell us how to say your name?
Tlacaelel, Tlacaelel. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes. The way I got that name is this gentleman here, Cecilio Garcia Camarillo, Chicano poet. May he also rest in peace. I organized an art exhibit. By the way, I have some of my cut paper art here. They're all behind museum glass. They are available if anybody's interested. I decided that I wanted to do papel picado, but I wanted to do it in my own sort of style. I don't want to do traditional skeletons and, skeleton dogs, so I kind of decided that I was gonna do my own sort of technique. But Cecilio and I put together an art exhibit in in Albuquerque, and I'm always looking for opportunities for my fellow artists to shine. I like to give folks, come on in, let's do this. In fact, there's an art exhibit up now at the Millicent Rogers Museum. It's coming down today. If you'd like to go check it out, today's the last day. It's Chicano artists from all over New Mexico. And so I'm always, again, trying to find opportunities for others, as you clearly do as well. And Cecilio wrote this book of poetry, and he said, you know what? I'm gonna start calling you Tlacaelel. My legal name is Patrick, but I changed it to Patricio. And then I added in Tlacaelel. But he said, I'm gonna start calling you Tlacaelel. And I said, well, Cecilio, why are you gonna start calling me Tlacaelel? He said, because Tlacaelel was an Aztec politician, an Aztec military man, and he always gave jobs to the jade workers, the feather workers, the turquoise workers. And he said, and you do that too, so I'm gonna start calling you Tlacaelel. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna become Tlacaelel. And to this day, that's my artist moniker. But I'll just read this poem. 6 a.m. and I drink a cup of hot tea that I got from John Lanza of the old Oraibi that put some magic in my body, then head out for the food stamp line. Freezing out here, I spit, and the whole thing turns into greenish chunks of ice. I walk 2 blocks and it starts snowing, and I say with my whole gut, oh shit. But it only lasts for a few minutes. Typical New Mexico, right? At the food stamp parking lot, and this scrubby gavacho in a Toyota pickup tries to pick up 2 incredible food stamp chicks wearing only light sweaters. And they cuss him out loud so everybody can hear. Goddamn macho asshole! This is the South Valley and it ain't a place for that kind of shit. Well, they all laugh. The horny guy out of existence, and he leaves with the old regulars and the food stamp line, about 25 early rising warriors, and we wait it out and we wait, and before we know it, it gets even colder than hell. And there's about 100 of us, and we're waiting and we're waiting. The snot on our noses turns to ice. How sad that we are experiencing that now. We all work hard, we all pay our taxes, and I've been a community health worker in the past, and I know that some people are not capable of surviving in the world that we live in. They can't go to work every day. They try to get a job and they cuss the boss out. They damage property. So, we hear people say, get a job. They're not capable of that. They don't have that proclivity. And so it warms my heart to see all of you doing your fundraising and the kindness that you're showing to your fellow citizens in Taos. And I also, in Albuquerque, collect shoes and coats and hats and earmuffs. And when I'm driving down the street, sometimes you'll see people with no shoes. So as a Catholic, what makes my religion work for me is that Jesus says, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, give drink to the thirsty, welcome the stranger. Those things work for me. And while they don't work for, many people, those who are taking food stamps away, there's those of us who try to fill up the void that's now created. So again, I appreciate being here with all of you. Bill, thank you for helping to make this possible. I left Albuquerque at 6 o'clock this morning, enjoyed the ride, played my music, and danced as I'm driving. And so once again, please help yourself to a candle, and go and put your own little altar together, and put your deceased loved ones on that altar, and again, as long as that twinkle is in your eye, your ancestors are still with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.